Thank you everyone for joining us. Welcome. I'm so excited for today's topic, which is adaptation and innovation in hotels and resorts, a global view. So today we have an incredible lineup. Can't wait to introduce them. Just a quick introduction. So PoE is a strategic advisory firm. We're a global company. We provide strategic advice in both cultural and corporate sectors. Today, obviously, you'll see myself and Megan represented from PoE and Mikhail. And we really represent the culture sector, which is hospitality, hotels, and museums. Obviously, and private members clubs. So today we're going to launch straight into this incredible topic, which we're all interested in because either we're passionate travelers or we're part of the hotels and resorts industry. So on that note, I'm going to introduce our amazing panelists. And first off, we have Philip Wegman calling in from Barcelona. Philip is the VP of Preferred Hotels and Resorts. And then we have Mark Elwood from a Rub Report, dialing in from New York. We then have Mikhail Goak from London. He is GM at the Mandrake Hotel and also a PoE hospitality advisor. And last but not least, Guy Haywood, COO from Six Senses Resorts. Thank you guys so much for joining. I'm so keen to hear your opinions on next step for travel, hotels, resorts. It's going to be a great session. So let's get started. I'm going to now introduce our moderator, Megan Mayer, who is the Global PoE Marketing Lead. And Megan's going to head off some of our questions. And just for the attendees, if you guys have any questions, please feel free to submit your questions in the Q&A box on your screen, and we will take note and get to those towards the end. So on that note, Megan, please take it away.
Thank you, Lauren, and thanks for everyone to be a part of today. This is going to be a very interesting, thought-provoking conversation. So the first topic I want to talk about is operations. My first question is for Guy of Six Senses Hotels. I think it'd be interesting to go back over the lockdown period and see if any of the Six Senses hotels actually closed during this period, and what are some of the changes from an operations perspective that you decided to implement?
Thanks, Megan. Changes to implement when we reopened, you mean, or?
Yes, correct. Mm-hmm.
So first of all, yes, obviously we did close down a bunch of hotels. We had, I think at one stage out of the 19, we had 15 closed. So COVID-19 obviously affected us really badly. But the good news is that we've reopened 6 of them already, and we're reopening another one tomorrow on the 24th in Thailand for the long weekend, because Monday, Tuesday is a public holiday in Thailand. And then we're reopening the Maldives on the 1st of August. So generally things are starting to come back to normal, which is great news. With regard to your second part of the question, yes, obviously, we kind of mulled over this because there's natural changes that you have to put into place around cleanliness and hygiene and new operating standards, and do all of your hosts, and for us, hosts is terminology for employees or staff. So do all of your hosts wear masks? Do they not? What do you do about social distancing, and so on? And so the conundrum for us was, we're a brand that focuses on wellness and sustainability. We have beautiful resorts in generally incredible environments where the standalone individual villas are quite well spread out. We're in nature. So we're quite well suited for physical distancing anyway. We're quite well suited for operating under these conditions because we don't have large key counts. We don't have hundreds of people fighting over a breakfast buffet. We don't have to have transportation by buses where we're putting guests together and so on. So we're quite well suited anyway in coming out of COVID-19 with regards to certain processes and policies that all of us have to put into place. However, on top of that, I think there's a sort of, I guess, a little bit of a moralistic thought process, and that is, what do people want, right? And we started to sort of put people into three categories. I think there's those that are going to be super scared and super conscious about travel and maybe won't travel until there's a vaccine because they just don't want to get on a plane. Fair enough, no problem. Then there's the cavalier people that will travel tomorrow, like myself, as I was saying earlier. I flew from Bangkok to Sweden right in the middle of it all. And for those kind of people, you don't have to worry too much. And then there's the majority, which would fall into the middle. And they're the sort of people that do want to get their life back on track, do want to travel, do want to have experiences, but are very conscious of not only, I think, the risk and sort of the health and safety, but also conscious travel. I think something that's come out of this has also been the impact that we've all had on the environment, and the fact that maybe COVID-19 has been an opportunity for the planet to take a big breath and sort of regenerate itself. And so people are starting to think, well, hold on, do I need to travel as often? I can do a lot more business on Zoom, like we're sort of doing right now. I can do virtual meetings. But I do kind of want to still travel, so let me be conscious about that. So therefore, I'm going to pick places that make sense to me, that where there's an education process for me or on my family, where there's an opportunity to give back to the community or to really think about the reason for the travel, not just go and sit on a beach and drink daiquiris all day long, but actually get something out of it. So for Six Senses, a brand that specializes and has key pillars of sustainability, wellness, that contributes 0.5% of all of our revenues to a sustainability fund that's spent in the communities where we have our properties and so on. I think we're quite well suited. So back to the question again. So therefore, I think that actually I don't want to change too much. I think people are coming to us for what we offer anyway and who we are, and they don't necessarily want to see dramatic change. So yes, we've implemented certain new kind of cleaning standards. We're looking at all sorts of different materials and chemicals that we use, and we're using an ozone system where there are no chemicals. That's very good for you, but obviously will kill all sort of bacteria and viral infections. But at the same time, being mindful to still give that magic. To still have that eye contact, to have the smile, to meet people, to interact face to face. There's no plastic screens on our reception desks, and we don't really even have reception desks. We're still doing in-room check-ins. We're still offering that beautiful, magical moment and experience that I guess ultimately want. And I think that as long as the guests know that we have got their safety and their security top of mind, which ultimately we do, as well as all of our hosts, then I think they're comfortable. And our occupancies that we're getting from the hotels that have reopened, I think are a testament to that.
Very, very helpful to know. Thank you for sharing. And Mikhail of the Mandrake is just about to open their doors. Can you share with what some of the key changes a boutique hotel has implemented that may be different to larger resorts such as the Six Senses, and if there are any differences between the two?
Yeah, hi Megan, hi everybody. So we are a 34-bedroom luxury boutique hotel in Fitzrovia. So we just reopened 3 weeks ago. We're trying to change only really the minimal. So obviously we have received the government guidelines and everything has been adapted, all the health and safety procedures, and we'll stick to everything we have to stick to, but we're trying to play obviously very relaxed and cool at the forefront, and not just trying to make a huge fuss about all this. But our general all our guests are quite pleased with all the health and safety procedures we have put in place. So the more safety they see around, hand sanitizers and screens and we designed masks with our logo and all of this, the better it is. I mean, everyone really appreciates that. We're doing really well. So we have a lot of outdoor spaces. We've got 2 terraces with up to 100 covers. They're naturally busy. Everybody feels safe in an outdoor environment, like I just said. So that's just naturally picking up. So we're lucky in that sense compared to other hotels in London. And so our F&B is almost at 100% 3 days a week. The bedrooms have just opened 10 days ago. And we have, I'd say, 90% leisure guests from the UK traveling into London, having just a fun weekend. And we're also at 80-90% occupancy. So we can't complain. We're doing very well overall. We have adapted the hotel operation a little bit, like creating a one-way system and floor markings and just what you see in shops around and so on. And spread the tables out in the restaurant and redesigned it a little bit with plans to make it look okay. And it's all right. It looks pretty much like it always looks. But obviously with distancing and more, you lose basically covers overall. So it's a little bit sensitive to manage the operation. You have to review your numbers every week and really make sure your payroll is adjusted. So there's redundancies involved, and we'll survive. We're okay. But it is a little bit different to reopen a hotel after being closed for 12 weeks. I've done a lot of openings. This was a very different opening. Everything was already in place and working, all the systems and all the staff. But bringing everybody back in is sort of, we have to re-educate, not re-educate, you've got to educate everybody on the COVID-19 procedure. So it is a bit different, but actually everybody after 12 weeks being home was so desperate to come back to work. They're also motivated and happy to be back. So it's a very good energy in the hotel. Everybody wants to work, which is quite cool. So it's not always like that, as you know. Yeah, I mean, you should come around and have a look. It's not that bad.
I can't wait. I will say Fitzrovia is my home stomping ground in London. I live between London and New York. So
cool.
It's one of the best corners of London. I think it's the gorgeous secret corner of central London that most people, if you said, where's Fitzrovia? They couldn't quite put it on the map. And that's the point. That's why it's so amazing.
Just come around. Definitely. Let me know.
Well,
that's, you brought up a couple of points there, which is interesting to talk about with the group, and that is to find out what are the more creative and inspiring examples, whether it be short-term or long-term changes to the operations that you've experienced or heard about from other operators that have been put into play in this market.
I was going to say, can I tell you a couple of things? And first of all, I'm going to credit my friend Scott, who works for Corgan, which is an airport architecture firm. He told me this. So Scott, thank you for this. He said, think back to 2001. And after 2001, the airlines were in crisis. And this is a sort of muscle memory now. So you compare that. After 2001, there was something called the theater of security, which is when suddenly things which had been very discreet were front and center. And he said, we're going to see the theater of wellness. And cleaning procedures that would have taken place at 3 a.m., they take place deliberately at 3 p.m. So people see them. You're not hiding them anymore. You are broadcasting them. Okay. So hotels, the operations, they may not be cleaning any more than they did before. They're just doing it so you see it. And I've seen, a hotel operator that I know said, we have done exactly that. Someone else said to me, we're putting way more towels in the room because if people decline a room attendant for a day, they've got extra towels. So they'll always have, so services change that way. I know that the Lodge at Blue Sky did something that I thought was brilliant and charming. Instead of turn down, it has made the door hangers into a little pouch. And in that pouch, you get, little doodaddy kind of shampoo, whatever. And you also get a little punnet of strawberries from the Blue Sky's own farm. And that is your nod that the room attendant has checked on you and a lovely moment of theatre. And I thought turning the fact that they have nixed turn down for wellness reasons into a chance to sort of surprise and delight people was genius.
Mark, I think that's a really good point. However, I would like to also ensure, I think quite a long time ago, there was this whole focus on, putting a sign on your door or on your bed or wherever about not washing your towels and your sheets and so on. And the hotel industry kind of got slammed because they, everyone thought it was just a money-saving exercise rather than a sustainable one. Now, of course, sustainability is front and center for everybody, and everybody's kind of not automatically washing their sheets every day, and if you hang your towels up, they don't get washed, which is all fantastic and perfect. I would like to make sure, however, that some of these measures don't then become cost-saving exercises for hotel brands, and something like turn down is a thing of the past. Where I come from in Six Senses and my background in Arman, I mean, it's all about service, right? It's all about those little touches. It's all about making sure that the guests have that personal interaction between the hosts and the guests. And I'm just concerned that. And I saw a video from a brand that will remain nameless, obviously, on a public forum like this, that sort of was showing and educating us all on their new standards. And I was horrified how impersonal it all was, and how that there was just this complete barrier between the guest and the hosts and the staff. And I think that's a shame, because that's the beauty of it.
But you see, this is the difference, and I think this is interesting. At Aquilina in Sunny Isles Beach, they have taken, essentially, if you're in a suite, you get a set of staff who act as your bubble while you're there. So you're not losing service. You essentially get allocated some people who do everything for you. So rather than saying there'll be random turn down, you could ask essentially like a extra butlers to do that for you. And I think you can do it that way, where you sort of cut back on some things, but say you have these people on call. That's a great way to keep it personal, but sort of reduce some of the touch points. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think that the word, I want to pick up on, you use as personal. So what we do a lot of our properties since we've reopened is actually, we personalize that experience. So you may have the very conscious traveler that kind of wants very little interaction. And so they don't even want their room made up, let alone turned down every day. And so that's fine. We'll have that strategy for that guest. But then you have the next guest that wants bring it on, service me 3 times a day. So we'll have that strategy for that guest. And I think that's the key, is if you could personalize the experience to what the guests ultimately require or want or need, then I think that's magical.
I think it's a really interesting point, how perhaps technology becomes now so important and such a vital part of finding out about what the guest needs, about finding this information out before they even get to the hotel or the resort, and using technology in a way to actually get that information so you're aware of what the customer's actually looking for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
I think, Guy, you made a good, sorry, Megan, did you want to continue? I just had one thought. Guy, you made a good comment about your hotels being well suited for the current crisis, and that's I can totally see that. And in fact, at Preferred, we have 750 member hotels. About half of them are resorts, and many of them, of course, are in a slightly better position at the moment, and they can cope with the whole situation a lot better. And then there's the city hotels, and Michael was reporting positive news from his own personal situation there, which was great for me to hear, because we have lots of city hotels that are certainly suffering a little bit more and have more difficulty in figuring out how to adapt operations. They just don't have the grounds and the spaces to work with that the resorts have. But what all of them have in common is that sustainability issue, because many of them were on a path to more sustainability, and now, of course, many of the new operating standards that had to be introduced all really complicate that matter, because there's so many single-use plastics all of a sudden that hotels had almost eliminated, and that are now in play again because of new regulations, and because the guest needs to see that. How are you, in particular, but also Michael, of course, how are you all dealing with that challenge? I was curious to hear.
Well, Philip, can you give me an example of what single-use plastics you're talking about? Because we haven't actually introduced anything.
Yeah, that's what I want to hear. I think that's brilliant, but I think a lot of hotels have felt the need to go the opposite direction now to make guests feel safe. So I'm curious to hear how you've gone about it.
Yeah,
I mean,
I mean, you know, masks. We're having washable masks that we've made. Also, like Mikhail with our logo on it. But otherwise, we're not using gloves because we feel that you know, the oceans right now are full of masks and gloves. It's really
exactly.
sad. So we're not recommending that, and we actually feel anyway that once you touch the things, you know, whether you got gloves on or your bare hands, it's just as bad as each other. And actually, without gloves on, you can wash your hands more regularly. You can use sanitizing gels and so on. So we don't use that. We kind of have no single-use plastics in our hotel rooms anyway. We have a goal to be completely plastic-free by 2022, actually across our whole brand. So we haven't really had to introduce anything, and I'm trying to think. Even the gels that we have around the hotels, we're using bulk containers, and we're obviously buying the gel in bulk and then refilling those containers. We're not having the little small ones that we give to guests to take with them, unless they're going hiking or something. Then we have a few of those. But I don't know, Mikhail, what about you?
Yeah, very similar to you. So all our masks are washable, you know, cotton designed, and you know, it's no plastic at all. We were thinking of laminating our menus, but then we got rid of that idea and just created some QR codes. So you just scan your menu and look it up on your phone in the room. So you look up your room service, your minibar menu, and in the restaurants and bars all around the F&B outlets, there's QR codes on the table. So just scan your phone. We actually don't have any plastic thinking about it at all.
No, it's good. It's good to hear. You know, certainly a huge issue and a huge challenge for all hotels. Not now. Not anything new really. We just acquired a company. Please go ahead.
It is funny. Sorry, Philip. You know, it's funny because I think us hoteliers are more concerned with all of this than the guests are. In all the hotels in the 6 hotels that we've reopened so far, we have noticed that most of the guests actually don't really care. They're not asking questions. They're not wearing the masks themselves. They're not concerned with what they touch in the room. They're not concerned with you know, housekeeping coming in and servicing their room. In fact, they're asking for it. So I think that we naturally have a duty of care to our guests and to our staff. And so therefore we're really concerned by this. And we've written 22 new policies and we've got all of these processes in place. Ultimately the guests, once they've made because I'm talking about back to my 3 types of guests again, the ones that have made a conscious decision to get on a plane and come to you, they've already come to terms with all of this. Exactly. The fact that you can't prevent yourself from touching things all over the world that may.
No, I'm with you. I'm also in group 1, and group 1 is traveling right now. But of course, then that huge group 2 that you were mentioning, they will start traveling now in the next few weeks, and they may be slightly more cautious and insecure about some of these things. And I'm super pleased to hear that you guys, both of you, also Mikhail, have not really gone back to a lot of the plastic that many hotels have already eliminated. You know, I'm just reporting back from the market how hoteliers are struggling with the 2 concepts. How am I going to do the 2 things successfully? I think this is what I'm hearing a lot in the market at the moment from our member hotels and other hoteliers. So glad to hear you're reporting differently.
I mean,
another subject we're talking about, we've already tapped into very neatly and quickly, is the health and safety. Mikhail, I know you've answered a couple of questions on this, but are there any specific changes that the Mandrake has made to emphasize the health and safety?
I mean, it's, you know, trying to make health and safety sound interesting. We have, I mean, everybody in the UK, every business has received probably 100 pages document with government guidelines that you have to screen. So every business has to set their own SOPs by department. And yes, we've put things in place. You know, we've got, we're very design led. So we have whatever we've created, it's all design led. So we made sure it all looks good. So from the entrance, you get your temperature checked, hand sanitizer, and you're registered. So your name and number. We can't have any walk-ins, so everybody needs to be set at a table. So very, very controlled. You come in, there's floor markings into the hotel. We created a one-way system, so you come into the hotel and then out of the hotel through another door. There's human signs everywhere, staff guiding people around. There's signages around the hotel, but it doesn't really look very I mean, it's all designed very well, so it doesn't stand out so much. The hotel still looks like it always looked, but we are managing very carefully. We removed any physical menus, like I said before, and you know, the overall impression is that people like that. The more safety procedures you put in place, the better it is. Like, it's overall really good.
I think it really depends where you're from. So if you've been living in London during the lockdown, you want to see these measures taken. If you're somewhere like Denmark, where no one worries about COVID at all, it would be weird to see all these measures in place. You don't even see anyone with masks.
Well, here in the hotel,
where you are. I mean, what's it like, Mark and Megan, in New York?
Well, I think New York, you know, obviously we've gone from being sort of the worst to the first in terms of, you know, having terrible COVID problems and then being very fortunate that things are reopening. I think the thing, when we look at health and safety, I was very interested. Manchester Airport has introduced security screening appointments. And I thought that was very interesting, the kind of the appointments will come in. And if you look at places, I think the island nations are going to be very telling about protocols that will work, because a lot of the Caribbean and so on have been able to control their coronavirus infections, and now they're reopening. And I'm just doing a story about Tahiti for our September issue, because Tahiti is reopened. And the charter business to Tahiti has exploded. And we're talking $120,000 each way on that G5. And the business is booming. And Tahiti says you need a PCR test within 48 hours. You'll have to use a private firm because here they don't come back quickly enough if you do it through the government. So that's a couple of $100. You do that. And then when you arrive, you're handed an at-home test. And 4 days after you arrive, you take that, it's a swab in your mouth. It's not the kind of up your nose like crazy, and hand it into your hotel. And as long as that's clear, you're free and clear. If it's negative, you are liable for the costs of your quarantine and hospitalization, and you agree to that. That kind of protocol at a macro level, I think, is going to start being very widespread. What do you think, Megan? I mean, sorry, we talked about New York, but I was so interested. I think the island, I don't think New York has many more lessons that are different from London, because I think operationally, from what I watch, I think they look quite similar. What do you think?
I mean, I definitely think the health and safety measures are a little bit more heightened. They're a lot more visible. To an earlier point, that the cleaning process is very visible. I'm seeing that quite present. I didn't want to see it before, the white gowns, just behind the scenes. Thank you very much. I don't want to be distracted, but I like seeing that in front of me, thing that's actually, you know, it's visible, and I feel like I'm in a clean, safe environment. But, you know, definitely we were in a very severe lockdown for quite some time, 3 months plus, and then some. Some people are still in the lockdown because they have a fear factor for, you know, going out into the greater public. But, you know, I feel that we're so well, that the engine is very well oiled now in New York City, and especially with food and beverage. So, you know, I'd say that we are creating some excellent in health and safety here.
And it poured with rain. We had an apocalyptic summer thunderstorm last night, like apocalyptic, right? And of course, all the dining is outdoors because there's no indoor dining in New York City. Thank you very much. Very smart. Thank you, Governor Cuomo. You are our fearless leader. And I loved the fact, I was going out for dinner and we were like, well, we're not going to go out. We'll just find somewhere that has a big awning. And sure enough, you just soldier on as it pours down around you. And I just thought, that's the spirit. We all just want to go out for dinner. We can't go inside. I'll keep my umbrella if I have to. And I think that, and it's a shared responsibility. I think that, you know, I always look down whenever I'm ordering. You don't put your mask on while you're eating, but you always sort of look down a bit like you've got bad breath when you talk to the server, and that feels polite.
I think you've got.
Am I the only one who does that? Is that interesting?
There you go.
It's only you. I think you've got the two things. You've obviously got the cleaning standards when the guest is already with you on property, and agree with everything that's been said. You want to be a little bit more visible there, and then you have communicating what you're doing differently before guests arrive. And a lot of the luxury hotels that we represent, and certainly all of your Six Senses hotels, Guy and Mikhail's hotel, you know, they've already been having pretty high cleaning standards to begin with pre-COVID, and now to communicate with a 100-page document to your various guest groups is just completely ridiculous. So we had to coach a lot of our hotels into really just getting something very brief put together, which we can then upload into our website and share with all the different B2B customers as well, so that they're all comfortable, but something that can actually be easily read and understood, because nobody's going to go into some of the first documents that we received from some hotels, which were 100 pages plus. You know, that's just not going to work. So this is, I think, how most hotels have gone about it. But now all of them are ready. Many of them are reopening again. And now the big question, of course, is can they remain open, which would be terrible after the investment that has gone into it for some hotels and other business. I hope they can just stay open now and actually use some of these new standards versus having to close again.
Yeah. I mean, our corporate guests have dropped massively. So 90% are all leisure. I think it's going to hit the corporate industry a little bit harder than the leisure hotels overall.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if you're in the mice business, then, you know, heaven help you, right? You got a long way to come back, because companies just aren't going to put their employees at risk. They're going to do this, you know, we're going to have online conferencing and meetings and so on. So leisure travel is, I think regional, drive market first, regional travel, long haul travel, and then sort of mice will be the last to return. But what's also interesting is from the hotels that we have reopened, we're actually seeing a lot of domestic business that wasn't there before.
Yeah.
In Vietnam, in one of our hotels.
Yeah, no, I agree. The drive business is critical because there's so little clarity still on other means of transportation. I mean, you touched on the situation at airports around the world. You really don't know what you're getting in most places. You know, one thing that you can control is getting into your own car and driving within your own country or across the world.
There was a really good statistic that stayed with me about Americans, that 41% of Americans thought that their vacation this summer would be by car within 100 miles of their home.
Yeah.
Well, isn't that the mentality of most Americans anyway?
Oh, I think that's a bit unfair.
Holders.
I think that's a bit unfair. I think no, but I think that
you're English, right? You're not Americans.
Oh, I'm American. I'm American as well. So I'm fighting the corner for Americans. I'm a little bit of both.
I'm a resident. I'm a green card holder, but I do have a passport.
Okay. I'll close it.
I'm not the typical Americans, put it that way. Not the typical.
But I want to sort of raise something maybe a little bit controversial, and that is that, I mean, what's the world going to come to? What are we as a human race going to come to? I mean, ultimately, as human beings, we're social creatures, right? We need to interact with people. We need to touch, we need to hug, we need to, you know, socialize, we need to have those conversations and so on. I'm just concerned that we're going to end up in a world where we're all scared of each other and nobody wants to kind of interact with each other. And, you know, there's no more handshaking and hugging and so on. And I just think that's really sad for ultimately what is a flu. You know, I mean, if we take Australia, and Lauren would know this, Australia as an example. Australia, I think the last count that I saw on the news, we've had 208 or 10 deaths. Mm-hmm. Every year from the common flu, influenza, we have 3,300 deaths every year in Australia. So go figure, like, and yet now we got millions of people unemployed, businesses going bankrupt. You know, so many businesses that won't come back from this. Domestic violence is through the roof. We've had more suicides than we've had deaths from the coronavirus. All because of the way the world is reacting to another strain of flu. Now, don't get me wrong, right? I mean, I do understand why people are concerned, and I do understand that some countries are having a really, really tough time, and this is awful. But at the end of the day, you know, you listen to so much, and I was listening to the podcast the other day that said something like every year we have 1.8 million people die of what was it? Some illness. He said, but we don't call it a pandemic any longer because we've been living with it for 50 years. So you know, I'm just concerned that if we're not careful, we're going to find ourselves in a very different world to what we're all comfortable with. And that world, I think, is potentially dangerous if we start to lose touch with people. You know, we need each other. We need to feel and to have that interaction and to have those beautiful conversations and have those, you know, moments of intimacy and relationships and comfort that we get from friends and family and all of those around us and your next door neighbor. And now we, like, you know, we're going to shun the next door neighbor because we don't know where they've been for the day. We're not going to say hello anymore, you know, and I think that would be very sad.
Yeah,
Totally.
it's a very important point that you made, and it's, you know, obviously there's a lot of fear mongering, and it comes down to creating a beautiful sense of community and reliability and support, and making people feel comfortable so that they can still remain how they were before. And obviously that's something that you're doing with the Six Senses hotels. But I want to actually ask our next question to Mark, which comes to the guest experience. I mean, traditionally guests relied heavily on, you know, travel writers for guidance on which hotels and resorts to visit, and also providing, you know, hotel resort trends. You know, there's so much changing in the hospitality and hotel industry out of necessity with health and safety and financial survival. How do you see the hotel resort press and reviews and criticism evolving, and what role do you think it actually plays in helping guests in this uncertain environment now?
So funny, because I'm going to answer in that sort of Mandy Rice Davis way, where he would say that, wouldn't he? So just I preface that where obviously I'm going to be quite self-serving, but I do think it's interesting if you look at the Google search data for sort of Q2 in America, which is really like looking into the hive mind of how are people thinking, right? It isn't, I don't want to travel, how do I cancel? It isn't, will I die when I travel? It's how do I travel safely right now? How do I have a vacation in the pandemic? So people want to travel, and so they want information. And I think that's been part of as we sort of the media's evolved, you're like, is it appropriate to talk about this? Yes, it is actually, because people, initially they wanted help canceling because they had kind of panicked, but now they want their hands held through the planning process. Now, what I think has been fascinating, if you look at the influencer world, which especially in travel has ballooned, and we all follow amazing, gorgeous pictures of that, there's been a real reckoning with that. Partly because a lot of those influencers don't know how to do anything if they're not traveling, and partly because a lot of them have been busted. There's an amazing account called Influencers Truth, and I don't know if anyone else follows this, but it is.
What is it
called?
Is like, sorry, you're cutting out. Influencers?
It's called Influencers Truth.
Okay.
And the stories of that are like a giant serving of Schadenfreude on top of your breakfast cereal. You just watch it every morning and you're like, oh, that's amazing. Kind of busting people for doing inappropriate things because they're not being policed the way that I am by my publisher, by my editor. And I do think, you know, we get a lot of feedback on social, for example, from Rob about, you know, how to travel. And a lot of our readers travel by jets, And I think it's brilliant for us because they do trust us to give them advice. Like it is weirdly positioning us in a way that I think we were seen as sort of the old guard, and you know, a lot of hotels were much more conscious of sort of like, how do we get an influencer there to take a great shot by the pool? And you know, I don't, and again, I'd ask the operators this, I think there's perhaps been a modulation of that. And I know that travel specialists will say to me, if we feature them in book or in an online story, they will say, oh, I got bookings from that. And I think, I don't know how many times a very, very expensive trip is booked from an Instagram stories post. But I would say that, wouldn't I?
No, that's a very
I think luxury, you know, for the luxury traveler or people with a certain disposable income, travel is not a luxury. It is absolutely one of the very first things they put on the list every year when they make plans on how to spend their money. It's just, or they don't even think about it. It's in their DNA, and it will come back. Even the other segments that Guy you touched on, I think even business travel will slowly come back over the next few months because people will need to do deals in person and celebrate them with a meal. I think some of that will absolutely come back. I know for myself, we're bringing hotels into the brand, but it just doesn't feel the same way. You know, there's certain things that you just have to talk through in person. And then on the MICE side, the one area within MICE where we're seeing huge demand at the moment, unfortunately, we have enough smaller hotels that can actually benefit from it, is buyouts. We're seeing all these requests for buyouts, and I would imagine maybe some Six Senses hotels are small enough for that too. You know, you see some really good requests there from the planners buying out hotels that have 50 to 100 rooms and owning the resort. We had that business before, but now at the moment it seems to be growing significantly, and maybe that's something to hold on to for the next few months. You know, the larger MICE hotels, of course, are going to be in some trouble for.
Yeah, that's a good point, Philip. And back on what Mark was saying earlier about Tahiti, or wherever you were mentioning, our hotel in the Seychelles. Right now, the Seychelles government has still got the Seychelles under lockdown, except if you want to come in by private jet, you can then apply.
Bahamas too. Yep, yeah, the Bahamas is like that.
So we're marketing it to a resort buyout. We have only 30 villas there, and they each go for north of 1,000 a night. And you know, we've had quite a lot of interest from groups that want to buy it out. And it may be a family, it may be 20, 30 people, whatever it might be. But you know, buying out a resort where you know everyone that you're taking there is known to you. So while there's no guarantee, then they're not carrying the virus, you know, you're pretty certain, you're certainly feeling a lot more comfortable anyway. And then the hosts who are there are living on the island, and you know, they're by nature living on the island, they're kind of quarantined anyway. So it's a great bit of business, and I think we're seeing that more and more throughout the world now. But yeah, back to your earlier point as well. I mean, business travel, you're right, it will come back, and I already made a business trip to Portugal last week. But I think
nice resort that you have.
Time and people will think about it. You know, instead of making, you know, business trip every 2 weeks, maybe they'll make one every 2 months or so, and you know, gradually build up to it. But it is going to change our world for sure, for a little while. But I think ultimately, you know, human beings, we're resilient and we're social creatures, as I said earlier, and it will come back. You're absolutely right.
I was going to say, can I take one of my favorite anecdotes? A jeweler, I cover luxury, not just travel, so I'm always interested to see how it intersects. And a jeweler I know just told me, he said, I just made a giant sale on a ring. And the client, who's a longtime client, said, oh, I've come to you because my wife said to me last week, well, what do I get instead of the vacation? Because we had so much money earmarked for our travel. We've done no travel this year. So what am I having instead?
And he didn't say a divorce?
No, but I just thought it was really, Philip, when you said it's for the luxury end, it is a given. It was a given, and she was sort of saying, but I've lost out. And it was, I think he was clearly kind of ribbing a bit, but there was an interesting insight into mindset at the sort of 1% there.
Yeah.
And then you have the destinations, of course, you know, all these places where there was maybe way too much cheap tourism going on, all of which is not going to come for some time, because that's pretty wiped out in some destinations. And that's maybe a huge opportunity for the world and these destinations to press the reset button, rethink everything. We have a sister company called Preferred Consulting, and we do consulting for destinations all over the world. And we just acquired another consultancy called Beyond Green Travel that also helps a lot of destinations to be more sustainable in their thinking and their approach. So we think that's maybe one of the silver linings that can come out of all of this, that some destinations in our cities as well, of course, entire countries and destinations can rethink about how they attract tourism, what kind of tourism they attract. I mean,
can you believe we were talking about I moderated a panel at South by Southwest a couple of years ago about over-tourism and the solutions to it. And we were like, how will anyone ever solve over-tourism? Over-tourism now feels like the least relevant topic. I mean, what's that?
Yeah.
People are going to Venice right now, and they have St. Mark's Square to themselves.
Sure. Yeah, Barcelona is empty. Amsterdam is a pleasure. Yeah. But now the question is, how do you make the changes, the necessary changes, regulatory and so forth, in some cases, to not go back to what we had in 5 years from now, you do want to go back to a different type of destinations in some of these examples.
I think that's a good point, Philip, and there is a need for controlling tourism. When you think about the impact, sustainable impact, and the mass tourism, the over tourism is bad, probably for a destination as what we're going through right now, on the other end of the spectrum. But I think that countries and councils and communities will start to think about this and how they come back from this and what sort of markets they want. And it's interesting because there's some destinations that specifically, if you take Bhutan as an example, right? Bhutan made a conscious decision, I don't know, 50 years ago or whatever, to go for quality over quantity. And you got to pay your price to get in there. And, there was only almond resorts for many, many years. And now Six Senses also have 5 lodges through the country. And, it's really appeals to a certain type of traveler. And they've managed to achieve, a pretty good state of the tourism industry in Bhutan. I think you'll start to see other countries thinking about this as well as they reopen. Is it just like open floodgates all over again and be back where we were within 2 years, or do we want to rethink this? But I do want to maybe, sorry, Megan, to I don't mean to take control, but I want to pick up on, because I'm conscious of time, but Lauren sort of introduced this as innovation, and as an innovation topic. We haven't really talked much about innovation, but I would like to touch on that a little bit and sort of ask everyone what innovative steps are we all making when we do reopen? And I know that from our perspective, we've actually worked from the XCOM level in our company quite diligently over the closure of the last 3-4 months on what does Six Senses look like post COVID-19. We've taken a conscious road to actually look at how do we slightly change our business model. What do we want to do? What do we want to be known for? And what was evident, and we also had an advisory board of high-end travel partners in New York, Europe, and Australia, or America, Europe, and Australia, I should say. And we asked them the same questions. And the 2 things that came out of it were kind of what we knew, which was sustainability, take it deeper and broader; wellness, take it deeper and broader. And from that, we started to think about things like rituals. So how do we give back to Mother Earth, or how do we make the guest experience a stay a little bit more empowering, a little bit more comprehensive, by, and one of the ways was to do these rituals around earth, fire, and water, and incorporate that into a guest experience. So again, the travel is a little bit more conscious, a little bit more educated, and you kind of feel good. So whether it's a shaman sort of blessing ceremony, or whether it's a fire ceremony, or giving something to the water nagas in our island destinations or whatever, we're folding that into a guest experience now. That originally might be on arrival, it might be during the stay, it might be on the way out, whatever it is. So I'd like to ask everyone else on the panel, sort of from an innovative point of view, how are we trying to innovate our industry?
Well, that's interesting, because when times are tough, you have to be creative and come up with something, isn't it? So we, at the Mandrake, we have bedrooms facing the courtyard, access to the terrace. So we created new revenue streams by converting bedrooms into private cabanas and designed them with plants, and remove the bed, put tables for 6 people in there. So it becomes like a private dining area, private dining room with a bathroom inside, very private, and then access to the terrace where you've got a cocktail bar and a 70 cover terrace. So we've converted like 6-7 cabanas on the ground floor, which are really selling very well 3-4 days a week. Obviously your profit is a lot lower because it's all F&B revenue and not bedroom revenue. So you have to sell a cabana 3 times or 4 times to make the same amount of money. But we turn them around with minimum spend, so for 2 hours, and it's doing well. There's a lot of press going out at the moment, and we probably will keep them forever because it's different to what everybody else does. And if that's doing well, we'll go one floor up, do the same thing on the next floor. But it's really well received, and it's fun. You know, it's different. But we're lucky because the rooms are facing the terrace. If the rooms would face a main street, it wouldn't be the same thing. Mm-hmm. You're still sort of next to the F&B outlet. You hear the music, you hear the people, so it's cool.
That's interesting. So you've actually created a new design solution out of this, out of necessity rather, but since you have guest experience feedback and it's a positive one and it's only a revenue making one, then you're going to take it into the future. So,
you know, I was going to say, when you talk about design, I was fascinated. Ted Brumleve, who runs Design for Wyndham, he said to me, we're going to think about putting mirrors in rooms or pelotons in rooms because gyms are there's going to be a muscle memory about gyms being a bit icky. And you can put one of those workout mirrors in a room. It's very minimal in terms of footprint. And that's a way to offer fitness. And I thought that was a very clever kind of pivot that doesn't really require the footprint of the room doesn't have to change. You can just put a mirror on the wall. And the other thing I loved, what a hotel inspector I know said, a lot of hotels won't tell you this, but that they are working on training the staff to show friendliness while wearing a mask because you can't see people smiling.
That's true.
So there will be SOPs about saying, it's so nice to see you. I am so happy.
Smiling with your eyes, yeah.
Because only like tire bags were all smiling.
It's actually difficult.
It's like, I mean, tire bags could teach us all, but it's that, I think it's really interesting to realize that you actually, even at that granular level, and the other thing that the pandemic has done is it's saved 2 endangered hotel design species, one of which was the front desk, which Lord knows why it was going away, because I like it to know where to go to ask a question. And now it's the perfect barrier. And the minibar, which everyone was getting rid of, is suddenly, everyone's like, I want a martini in my minibar. I don't want to go down to the bar in the hotel. So I think we'll also see interesting innovations around those because they've suddenly gone from being unwanted to being useful.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you operationally you guys have seen that, but you know.
You make good points, Mark. And Mikhail, your story is interesting because I've seen these capsules pop up everywhere. I saw one pre-COVID in Amsterdam, and now I've seen it pop up in at least 4 or 5 hotels where they've built these glass capsules, beautiful capsules where 2 or 4 people can have a private dinner, and they have them on rooftops and on terraces and in gardens, and they look pretty stylish, the ones that I've seen in some of our hotels. I've not dined in any of them yet, but I think these are actually there to stay. I think they will always be around.
Aren't they really
private
hot?
cabins.
I would think that the glass things wouldn't...
Greenhouse?
Are they air-conditioned?
I haven't dined in one yet, so I can't tell you about the temperature inside. I'm sure they've thought about that in some places. Otherwise, you'd be dead after like a 90-minute meal. You know? Suffocating in there. I'm sure I hope they thought about that.
Well, guys, we have about 5 minutes left. I'm just looking at some of the questions. We actually have covered a few of the questions in our discussions already. So on topics of actually signposting, how to get around signposting without it, you know, coming across as garish, notifying guests of what health and safety measures you put in the hotel, and how that's maybe helped the guest experience. And Mikhail, I think you quite eloquently covered that as a representation in the Mandrake. And we also have questions on design elements. And I think in terms of what Guy mentioned about innovation, how are we thinking about opening a new hotel, maybe not reopening, but new hotel design and innovation and what that might look like? Have we now changed our perspective of, instead of just another resort or another hotel, has this time actually helped us rethink the design of a hotel? I mean, I might quickly hand it over to you guys to just jump in and provide an answer on that.
I think it's hard from a urban perspective. It's a lot easier from a resort perspective, obviously, because you can think about physical distancing. You can think about outdoor spaces and all of that in an urban environment where you got land. And when you're, in a resort environment, when you're in an urban environment and you don't have land and you're going vertical rather than horizontal, it's a little bit harder. But, you know, back to, I think there is a lot you can still think about. Back to Mark's point, you know, you can put in-room exercise equipment, whatever it might be. You could think about the touch points in the guest room. You know, I think there's quite a lot you can do. However, I would also, you know, as I said earlier, I would question a little bit the knee-jerk reaction to something that won't, you know, it may be around forever, but we'll learn to live with it like we have done all the other flu viruses. I don't think ultimately that designers should be designing reception desks that look like a bank vault, you know, where you have this tiny little speaker, or like you get it when you go to a mass stadium or whatever and you're buying a ticket, you know, a little speaker to talk through, and you press a button so that the person behind there can hear you, or like in New York where you have the plastic screens between the front of the taxi and the back of the taxi and so on. Because I think ultimately that would be really sad. You know, we are a people industry, and we need contact, we need interaction. So I think temporary measures are great, and temporary measures should be taken. But I don't think ultimately that the overall industry should think about redesigning their hotels with all sorts of barriers to that interaction, to that human interaction that won't be, you know, that won't be necessary hopefully in another 12 months time. Because it's either it's going to be short-lived, or B, we're going to learn to live with it and move on, and C, because our human nature is such that we want that interaction. And, you know, Mark, you were saying that the lobby was going, and you're kind of glad that it's coming back. Personally, I'm not a favor of the reception desk, but that's just a personal thing. It's also a type of hotel. If you are a big city hotel with 500 rooms, you need it, absolutely. You know, if you're in a resort environment with 40, 50, 60 rooms, you don't need it. So I think that it's a question of not, you know, knee-jerk reaction to something that's here now, that you're going to then be stuck with for a 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 year life hotel.
Don't you think that, you see, I think we have to, I think people will plan for other pandemics. I think this has reminded us that this could happen again with a different disease. So they're going to want to be able to flip the switch and be like, oh, now there's this crazy elephant virus that we will have to be afraid of. But I do think that the way that hotels have done buyouts and have configured themselves a bit like Lego bricks to be modular that way, I think design will be much more conscious of that, because buyouts are a great thing. They're a win-win-win-win-win. You make lots of money. It's easier to operationally, you can do all this kind of stuff. And I do think that will stay, so that people will be able, when the elephant virus comes to get us, to flick the switch and be like, oh, we're buyouts again. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Makes sense. Well, I just want to do a quick closing for the group. You know, there's lots of different subjects that we've covered. It's great to finish on a positive note. I'd like to find out from you all what you're most excited about, and where do you see the biggest opportunities moving forwards?
So Megan, can you say that again? Where do we see what moving forward?
Where do you see the biggest opportunities moving forwards? Ending the conversation on a positive note.
If you take there's a Japanese word called kiki, K-I-K-I, and it's got two characters written in katakana or kanji, I think it is, and that the two characters, while the K-I and K-I is exactly the same, it means crisis and opportunity. And of every crisis comes an opportunity. And I think right now we all have an opportunity. We have an opportunity to innovate. We have an opportunity to rethink business models. We have an opportunity to you know, to actually take the fact that we're all struggling and you know, the fact that we're all kind of trying to survive, to actually enhance everything that we do. So whether it's re-looking at your staffing models, whether it's re-looking at some of your operating procedures, whether it's re-looking at your overall concept of hotel, whatever it might be, or whether it's re-looking at you know, the guest experience, it's given us a breather. It's given us an opportunity to sort of step back under crisis and say, okay, where are we going to go? How are we going to come out of this? How are we going to be bigger and better and stronger tomorrow than we are today? What do we need to do? How do we enhance our business model? How do we make sure that we're giving our guests and our hosts a better experience than they've had before? And I think whatever it might be, because there's always going to be different strokes for different folks. We've got all types of businesses, right? From big to small to urban to resort. To golf, to marinas, and so on in our industry, right? I mean, we're the biggest industry there is and the most broad. So everybody will do their own thing, but I think that we're all innovating, and I think innovating is really cool. Everyone's having to rethink, and everyone's having to think about their marketing strategies and think about new markets. And as I said earlier, all of a sudden we've got a hotel in Vietnam that's had 4 months in a row, 90% plus occupancy, only with Vietnamese business that we never had before. Because we've had to innovate, we've had to come up with revised strategies to attract that market, because it was the only market we could get. So in the future, if we get our traditional international market coming in on top of the domestic market, we're going to be better than we were before. And that's a cool thing.
True. Good points. I think for us as preferred, we will benefit in the sense that the opportunity for us is that this trend for hotels to look for more independence versus being tied into pretty restrictive franchise agreements with the big hard brands, not the smaller boutique brands, but the big hard brands. That trend will continue. Hotels will look for more freedom. Look at the Mandrake; they're doing it 100% alone, not even an affiliation like us. I'll talk to them after the call. Definitely, we hope that trend will continue. In fact, this year, except for maybe April and May, the rest of the year is promising to be an incredibly interesting, positive year for us in terms of new development, new hotels joining the brand, because you have hotels obviously needing much more support than they needed before. And at the same time, they don't want to be tying themselves into long-term contracts with the hard brands where you're looking at 10 years usually minimum. And that doesn't really give you the flexibility to react to challenges like the one we're experiencing now. And so we think it's a really, really tough year, but we're going to come out okay because of some silver linings like this. And, everything that Guy said earlier about looking at your staffing, with your teams and what they're doing, are you using the talent in the best ways, all of that, I subscribe to that 100%. Yeah.
And can I say what I was excited about? Because I have a different thing. I'm excited to get on a plane for the first time since March 13th. I haven't been this grounded for this long since I was 22. And I'm going to St. Bart's next month, and I cannot wait. I will kiss St. Bart's next month.
What happened to you when you were 22? How boring were you back then? What happened when you were 22?
That's when I left college. So, and then I started work. But I'm just saying, I'm going to kiss the JFK concourse, disinfect it, and then kiss it.
Brilliant.
Mark, just before you finish, I'd love to know where else you think are like the top hotspot travel destinations from your perspective.
Well, I think the long haul islands, the Maldives has reopened, Tahiti, as I say, the numbers on Tahiti are fascinating when you realize that the cost of charters to some of these places from anywhere is stratospheric, and they are booking like crazy. So, it's no more Monte Carlo. It's harder to get to Italy, that whole scene. Sardinia, tougher, but you can go to Tahiti, you can go to the Maldives. I think Africa's going to be tough. I think Safari is going to be tough immediately because of some of the airlift and stuff like that. But island nations, some of the Caribbean, St. Bart's is chugging. The villa rental, the Eden Rock villa rental operation is packed to the rafters.
Excellent.
So St. Bart's, I'll be there, and I cannot believe it. I'm so excited to be on a plane.
We'll watch your every move on Instagram, I'm sure.
There we go. Yes.
At Mark Elwood, yeah, that's my name.
Yeah. Mikhail?
Yeah, I mean, I think the media puts a lot of fear in everyone anyway, whatever you see, which is a massive part of why we are where we are as well. But I can see every single day here, every guest who comes into our hotel, people are desperate to get out and get back to normal life again. They do respect the distance and they do respect all the procedures in place, but everybody has a good time, and it seems like a normal day. But if you go to Soho in central London, everything is also normal up until 9 p.m. and then it's mayhem because no one cares. No one cares about distancing. There's crowds on the streets. Everyone is together. People have a good time. Everybody wants to be out and be back to a normal life as soon as possible. So I think hospitality should be doing well. It's just a slow progress, but it's heading the right direction. Hopefully there's no second lockdown.
Great. Well, I think that's a wonderful closing. I don't know if there's anything else that people want to add. Do we have time for questions, Lauren? Have we've covered everything?
We actually covered a lot of the questions in what we've spoken about, and I'm amazed. We just had such an amazing conversation. We've even had comments just saying how great and engaging this conversation has been. I feel like we could go on for another 2 hours. Appreciate everyone's time. This has just been a fantastic discussion and hopefully a bit of lessons learned from each other, and definitely a positive outlook. So appreciate everyone's positivity and feedback, and can't wait to see what happens for the resorts and the hotels, definitely, that I'll be visiting at least.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm going to the Mandarin. The minute I get back to London, I'll be round the corner from you, and I'm going and I will say hello. I cannot wait. It's very good.
I've eaten there before. It's really good. Yeah.
I'll be calling you for a room.
Yeah.
Oh no, I have a house. That I don't need. I just want to see the hotel. I'll spend some money with you.
Book the penthouse.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thank
Love
you.
to see you.
Great talking to everyone.
Thank you everyone for joining. It's been a
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.